you said, I fully believe that if, Noam Chomsky and Oprah Winfrey, to innovate at the highest level, you have to learn how to be fully focused. I 100% agree with that part. So let's talk about somebody that's right now, got all the distractions we all got. They got one of these, they got an iPad, they got kids, they got family, they got, their jobs, they're trying to get a side hustle, they got, all these other things that they're doing, and they're having a hard time stay focused. What is the basic formula for one to stay focused?
So there's lots of things, and I go through dozens in the book, but I'll give you an example of one that really helped me in my life, and I think will help people in that position. So I learned a lot about the science of something that are called flow states. Everyone listening will have experienced a flow state. A flow state is when you're doing something that's really meaningful to you, and you just get into it, and you're in the zone, and it's like time falls away and your ego falls away and you're just in it. The way one rock climber put it is a flow state is like when you feel like you are the rock you're climbing, right? So for me, it would be when I write. For someone else, it might be when they make bagels or they do brain surgery or they play the guitar. But a flow state is really important for attention for two reasons. A flow state is the deepest form of attention you can bring, right? When you're in a flow state, you are deeply focused. And a flow state is the easiest form of attention. Once you get into it, it's not like memorizing facts for an exam. It's like, oh shit, how do I do this?
In that state.
You're in it. You don't even have to want to be in it. There's no effort involved. It's called a flow state because you are just flowing, right? So I wanted to understand, given this is the easiest form of attention once you're in it and the deepest, shit, how do we get more of this? So I went to interview Professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. You have no idea how long it took me to learn how to say that. Who is the leading that sadly died recently, but he was the leading expert on flow states. He studied them for over 50 years. He's the man who coined the phrase. And he discovered a shit ton of stuff about this. But I think there's three that would really help the person you're talking about. Three key facts. If you want to maximize your chances of getting into a flow state, and there's no guarantee, but if you want to maximize your chances, you've got to do three things. Firstly, you've got to narrow down to one goal. If you're trying to do more than one thing at a time, you'll never get into flow. Choose one goal. Secondly, it's got to be a goal that's meaningful to you, right? If it's not meaningful, you won't get into flow. And thirdly, it will really help if you choose a goal, and this is counterintuitive at first, it will really help if you choose a goal that's at the edge of your comfort zone, at the edge of your abilities. So let's say you're a medium talent rock climber, right? You don't want to just try and climb over your garden wall. It's not going to get you into flow. Equally, you don't want to try and suddenly climb like, one of those mountains in Colorado that's really high. You'll just shit yourself. You want to choose a rock face that is slightly higher and harder than the last rock face you climbed. So if you do these three things, choose one goal, make it a meaningful goal, make it one at the edge of your abilities, you massively maximize your chances of getting into a flow state and being able to do that deep form of attention. Mm-hmm. But there's lots of other things that we can do. I recommend really long social media breaks. I take half the year completely off social media, and I'm so much more productive in those 6 months than I am in the 6 months when I'm on it. I sleep much more than I used to. I mentioned the K-safe. I bind myself in. I lock that shit away. Because I know that I'll crack if I just leave it sitting there. But there's one about kids that I think is really important as well, because in a way, if we're not building the baseline of focus and attention for children, this is going to be an even bigger problem 20, 30 years from now.
You're saying kids to get into a flow state?
No, just generally, for children and attention more generally.
But before we get to kids, I know we're going to spend time on that. I want to talk about that flow state because we have a lot of entrepreneurs on our channel, people that are in business. Some of the things you were talking about, they have a very much similarity to what we talk about here. What you talk about here is rather than doing a handful of tasks, gets focused on that. And what we call that is being a specialist versus being a jack of all trades. It's the first thing I thought of. It's like, okay, if you want to be good at something, focus on one thing and be great at that one thing. Everyone wants to talk about having, double sources of income and like multiple incomes coming in. It's like, no, let's just get one income solidified. And then number two, you said what?
Meaningful goal.
Meaningful goal.
Meaningful goal.
So for that, they say you have to work about something that you're passionate about. Yeah. You don't have to. Pat's passion is baseball cards, but or baseball. He wasn't going to be a baseball player or collect baseball cards for a living.
I will never understand American sports, no matter how long I live here.
Cricket.
It's a fucking cricket, mate.
But basically, choose something that you'll specialize in, that you're passionate about, And then last but not least, your comfort zone will kill you. Push yourself to the point where you're like, I don't know if I really want to do that, but I'll go for it. But so it seems to be an analogous to basically the business stuff that you talked about. Did you kind of pick that up when you were saying that?
And Tyler just pulled something up, David. If you can show this, how to take Bill Gates' Think Week to recover from life.
Every year he takes a week with Bill Gates. He goes to a cabin, no phone, no laptop, no nothing. And you think about guys like Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, all the multi-billionaires that are innovators. What do they do every morning? They wake up and they meditate. They don't have their phones. They don't have their iPads. They read. They sit. They think.
Well,
there's
speculation that a friend of him would meet him at this Think Week place, but that's a different conversation. but let me go. I think I fully.
I feel like there's a story there, but I want to hear it.
But there is a story there.
Tell me offline.
But he's no longer married. Put it that way.
Oh, right.
What I like about this is I fully subscribe to this. I sometimes would say, hey, I'm going over here. I'm going to be here for a day. Don't bother me. If you need to get a hold of me, here's my room number. Here's this.
Well, you said the story about when you went to Harvard Business School, and what did the biz doc ask you to do?
He says, don't touch your phone. Don't worry about it. We got this thing. We're going to take care of it.
And how hard was that for you to do?
Mathematically impossible. I was going saying it's like an addict.
You do not regret it, do you?
Oh, it was one of the best things I did.
But this is why it's so interesting about touching your phone. The average person touches their phone 2,617 times a day, right? And
it used to be 150 just 10 years ago.
I know, it's massively exploding.
What was the number?
2,617. It's probably higher now because that research was done before the pandemic. So you think about, you're exactly right. The reason the subtitle for the book is "And How to Think Deeply Again" is for exactly this reason, right? Because we were talking before about some of the benefits, right? And there are real benefits from the speedy way in which we live. It's very important to acknowledge that. But one of the costs is when you go really fast, you lose depth. And in all innovation and all originality and all creativity come from depth, right? So what happens is we're constantly living in the shallows, this kind of manic mode. So if you don't make space, and we've got to be honest with people, the way Professor Joel Nigg, who I mentioned before, one of the leading experts on children's attention problems, put it to me, is he said we live in what he called an attentional pathogenic environment, which means this is an environment where it's very hard for people to do the right thing and focus deeply. The number of people who can do what Bill Gates does is very small, right? The number of people who can do what we're proposing currently is small. And the only thing I think in this whole conversation, I think the only thing where I've disagreed with, and I understand why you say it, because part of me thinks it is, you said before, I can't see where I wrote it down, but you said something like, this is never going to change, right? You're going to always be in an environment that's going to be, and of course, there's always going to be some distractions. You're right about that. There's always going to be a human struggle between, you can go back to monks 1,000 years ago and they still struggled a little bit with, well, I could be distracted by this thing or I could do this other thing. But we're living in an environment now that is hugely damaging our attention, right? And I do think we've got to understand that. Because A, we can protect ourselves and our kids better when we understand it, but B, because the environment can change, right? Think about leaded paint, right? When we were kids, we were exposed to lead. That damaged our attention, right? Damages everyone's attention. You could have said then, I'm sure you wouldn't have, but people did say then, this is always going to be a problem, right? How are we ever going to deal with it? But actually we did deal with it, right? And for all of the other 12 factors that we're talking about, there are very practical solutions. So let's think about the ones that relate to kids in particular, because I'm fascinated by, so we can look at the school system, but set that aside for a minute, right? There's a huge change that I think we're really well suited to see, people our age.
So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.